Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. So continuing on with my top 10 episodes, which I have been enjoying so much recently, I thought that I would mix it up a little bit and do a top 10 episode for some of the movies that you can currently stream. But seeing as how there are plenty of episodes out there for streaming platforms such as Netflix, Prime Video and Shudder and all those others, I thought that I would do an episode for a streaming platform that some of you may not even know actually have horror and thriller movies on them. So today we're going to talk about what I think are the top 10 horror and thriller movies streaming on Disney Plus currently. Since adding the Star section back in February 2021, Disney Plus now has a large range and variety of TV shows and movies with all different genres, including all 11 seasons of The Walking Dead and all 10 seasons of American Horror Story. It has a mixture of classics but also some newer releases, which I believe are also available to stream on Hulu. So before we get started with the list, I just want to say that I'm not going to put these movies in any particular order, and even if you don't have Disney Plus, I would still recommend checking out these movies in the list. And also a heads up, I will be talking about some story elements from the movies, so some very mild spoilers may be included, but I am going to timestamp every movie so you can skip ahead if you need to. Fresh was released earlier this year and was directed by Mimi Cave and written by Lauren Kahn. It stars Daisy Edgar-Jones and Sebastian Stan. Fresh follows Noah, a young woman who is quickly growing tired of the men she meets on online dating apps and is becoming disillusioned with dating. That is until one day she meets Steve in a grocery store who asks for her number. The two hit it off and begin a relationship, but maybe there is more to Steve than meets the eye. Fresh had its debut at Sundance in January and in my opinion is one of the best movies to be released so far this year and could well go on to be one of my overall favourites of the year. What I loved about Fresh was how it initially sets out as one thing, setting itself up as a little bit of a rom-com almost, but then about 30 minutes in it does this shocking 180 and just becomes something completely different entirely. This could be considered a shocking move, but then it's right at home in this film, which goes to some pretty shocking places, but never to the point where it crosses the line or becomes disdainful. There is so much to unpack with Fresh, accidental pun, but Mimi Cave balances the gore and violence with a deeper meaning as she explores abuse, both mental and physical. The two leads give an incredible performance and the soundtrack's pretty cool as well, especially the ones from the 80s, so much so that I still regularly listen to songs from it. Underwater is a horror sci-fi movie that was released in 2020. It was directed by William Eubank and stars Kristen Stewart, TJ Miller and Vincent Cassel. After water breaches the walls of their drilling station miles underwater in the Mariana Trench, Nora and a small group of survivors must try to survive and reach the surface. However, they soon realise that the only way to do that is to walk across the sea floor. Underwater is a horror thriller, creature feature and a survival movie, and it's very reminiscent of movies such as Alien, The Abyss and Sphere. I checked this out because I'm a big fan of horror movies set around water and a big fan of creature features, but I was pleasantly surprised by Underwater. This was not what I expected to get from a creature feature. Honestly, for me, the real horror in Underwater came from the high level of anxiety, claustrophobia and hopelessness that was created and then maintained for almost the entirety of the movie. In fact, even though I would definitely recommend this movie, if you are someone who's quite sensitive to things like claustrophobia and anxiety, I would bear that in mind before watching the film. Kristen Stewart also gives an incredible performance in Underwater. I've not really seen a lot of her work, but what she manages to do in this film is balance a constant mixture of terrified at the situation but confidence at saving herself and her team. Black Swan was released in 2010 and was directed by Darren Aronofsky. It stars Natalie Portman as Nina, a ballerina who finally gets the chance to land the lead role in a production of Swan Lake. But while she embodies the qualities of the White Swan, Princess Odette, she struggles to capture the darker character of the Black Swan. Nina's dangerous obsession with perfection and fear of being replaced by rival Lily soon leads Nina to lose her grip on reality and descend into madness. Black Swan is quite reminiscent of movies such as Climax and Suspiria. It's a study of obsession, reality and mental health. The movie has a very overall dark tone to it and deals with some pretty distressing topics which aren't always obvious at first, but you gradually pick up on them as the film progresses. It makes the movie an uncomfortable watch at times, and some of the scenes in it are genuinely terrifying, and there is a little bit of body horror in it, but Black Swan has this wonderful blend of beauty and horror, and some of the visuals in the movie are absolutely stunning. And Natalie Portman's performance as Nina is spectacular as we follow Nina's journey through passion to obsession and then eventually on to self-destruction. Nightmare Alley was released in 2021 and was directed by Guillermo del Toro. It stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette and Willem Dafoe. Set in New York during the 1940s, it follows Stanton Carlyle who, while down on his luck, joins a travelling carnival. Taken in by Xena and her husband, Stanton helps them with their show and picks up a few skills of his own. Stanton eventually decides to set out on his own, swindling the wealthy elite, but when he sets his sights on a dangerous tycoon, he might have just met his most formidable opponent yet. Nightmare Alley is based on the book of the same name that was released in 1946 and is the second adaptation to be made after the 1947 original. I haven't seen the original movie or read the book, so unfortunately I'm not able to compare them to this 2021 edition. So the first thing that I want to mention about Nightmare Alley is that it is a devastatingly beautiful movie with sets ranging from the rundown carnival to glitzy New York clubs to sleek New York high-rises with Art Deco offices in them. I am a sucker for the style of the 1930s and 1940s, so I was already inclined to enjoy the aesthetic of this movie, but honestly the set dressers and costume department outdid themselves. Even the rundown greyish carnival setting has its own odd beauty about it. Bradley Cooper is interesting to watch as Stanton Carlyle, and I think that the relationship between Stanton and the audience evolves as the film progresses, as we begin to see different sides of the character unfold. My only negative with this movie is the runtime. I think that at 2 hours and 20 minutes, it's slightly too long, and there are moments in the film where it does feel like it's dragging. However, the runtime is completely worth it just for that end scene. So the impact of the end scene is built up through the film, and you do have to pay attention so that you don't miss any important conversations that happen, but it is a magnificently simple scene that genuinely chilled me to my bone and stayed with me long after watching the movie. Ready or Not was released in 2019 and stars Samara Weaving, Adam Brody and Andy McDowell. It was directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, also known as Radio Silence. It follows Grace, who couldn't be happier after she marries the man of her dreams at his family's luxurious estate. But after the wedding ceremony, her new in-laws force her to participate in a seemingly innocent game. Things soon turn bloody and sinister, revealing the sick rituals of the family. Ready or Not is a pretty violent, dark comedy which delivers some highly entertaining moments, including one scene in which Samara Weaving shouts "fucking rich people" through bloodied teeth. It's not a perfect movie, there are some parts that fall short, but there is no denying that this is an incredibly fun film. Samara Weaving as Grace is a delight to watch. She has some really good lines in the movie and some creative and colourful profanities. She's your classic final girl, she's clever and resourceful, but they never go in an unbelievable direction with her turning her into this perfect killing machine. The idea of rich aristocrats hunting humans for fun and sports is not a new idea in films, but Ready or Not do go in quite a fresh direction by giving our final girl a sporting chance as our arrogant, privileged family members stumble through their incompetence. The Night House was due for release in 2020 but was delayed until 2021. It was directed by David Bruckner and stars Rebecca Hall. Reeling from the unexpected death of her husband, Beth is left alone in the lakeside house he built for her. Dreams and disturbing visions of a presence in the house call to her, but the harsh light of day washes away any proof of a haunting. Against the advice of her friends, she begins digging into her husband's belongings, looking for answers. I really enjoyed The Night House and it was in my top 10 movies of 2021. It's an excellent mixture of a horror movie done for a modern audience but with plenty of callbacks to classic horror movies. So what stood out to me about The Night House was how, unlike some other horror movies, these scares weren't contained in specific scenes, but rather there was an intense level of unease through the entire movie. Don't get me wrong, there are some really well executed jump scares in the film, but this one lingers with you for quite a while, and I think it's down to the level of unease rather than the jump scares. This is also a really strong screenplay that doesn't over-explain everything to its audience. There are a lot of layers in The Night House as it delves into grief, but also the idea of mythology and supernatural beliefs and practices. And I have to say there are some incredible looking scenes and visuals in the film, which do come from the lakeside setting, but also come from how the film plays around with sort of inverted images and mirror images. Jennifer's Body was released in 2009 and was directed by Karen Kusama. It stars Megan Fox, Amanda Seyfried and Adam Brody. It follows Jennifer, who becomes possessed and turns into a succubus after she is sacrificed to Satan. As Jennifer satisfies her appetite for human flesh with male classmates, her best friend, Needy, learns what's happening and vows to put an end to it. On its initial release, Jennifer's Body wasn't well received. In recent years, it has gone on to become a cult classic and admired for its underlining feminist themes. Jennifer's Body is a movie about female strength, female friendships, and sexuality. Our titular character, Jennifer, is often considered to be a victim by audience members because of what happens to her, the event that is the catalyst for the rest of the film. But whether you agree and think she's a victim or a villain, we are given an empowering anti-hero that we can sympathise with. Jennifer's Body is a movie that turns a lot of horror tropes on its head, and while Jennifer is initially targeted because of her sexuality, the film itself doesn't punish her because of this, and it is this essentially in the end that gives her a lot of her strengths. The Empty Man was released in 2020. It was directed by David Pryor and stars James Badge Dale. When a young girl mysteriously disappears, James Lasombra, a former police officer, sets out to investigate the matter. In the process, he stumbles upon a dangerous cult trying to summon a supernatural entity. In my opinion, the strongest part of this movie is its cold opening, which runs for approximately 22 minutes and could be a standalone short movie all on its own. The setup, setting and delivery of the story is wonderful and has a feeling of unease through the whole thing. Once we move into the main bulk of the movie, it did become a little less nuanced, but The Empty Man really reminded me of The Ring, so if you're a fan of films like that, then you might well like this one too. Like The Ring, The Empty Man uses eerie sounds and eerie settings to create that level of unease in the movie, and the story delves into things like guilt and grief through its lead character, but also into things like mind control. There are a couple of weaker points to The Empty Man, one of them being unfortunately the climax of the movie, in my opinion. The other one is the runtime of 2 hours 17 minutes, which feels like quite an investment of time, but there are enough good aspects to the film to make it worth a watch. Alien was released in 1979 and was directed by Ridley Scott. It stars Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt and John Hurt. It follows the crew of the spacecraft Nostromo, who intercept a distress signal from a planet and set out to investigate. However, to their horror, one of their crewmates is attacked by an alien, which later invades their ship. I'm sure all of you have heard of this little movie and most probably seen it already, but I had to include it on this list as it is an absolute classic and a staple watch for any horror or sci-fi fan. While the rest of the Alien franchise does go on to become a bit of a mixture of horror and action, the original movie Alien is at its core a horror film, in particular that of a haunted house and home invasion horror. The xenomorph, designed by H.R. Geiger, is one of the scariest creatures ever created, in my opinion. It's designed to be this perfect killing machine, and while it has multiple stages to its lifespan, it makes it a really interesting villain. Alien also has one of the best final girls in history, Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver. And I find her role in the original movie really interesting because it was originally written to be a male role, and this was later changed. And honestly, I think this change was for the better because this switch in gender adds another dynamic to the storytelling. Alien also looks into man versus nature, morality, corruption of corporations, and the creation of life. No Exit was released earlier this year and was directed by Damien Power. It stars Havana Rose Liu and Dennis Haysbert. It follows Darby, who is in a recovery program, but she receives a phone call telling her her mother is in hospital seriously ill. Darby breaks out of the rehab centre and drives to Salt Lake City to visit her mum. En route though, and caught up in a blizzard, she has to stop at a mountain rest stop for safety. Things take a turn for the worse when she discovers a kidnapped child tied up in a car belonging to one of the people inside the rest stop. Darby has to fight to save the girl and find out who is responsible. So No Exit actually reminded me of quite a few different movies. There were some nods to some and an overall feel of others. There were lots of lovely aerial shots which reminded me of the aerial shots in The Shining, and there were a couple of scenes that felt like they were just completely lifted out of Psycho. And then the rest of the movie reminded me of the John Cusack thriller Identity and some other murder mystery whodunits, where you have a bunch bunch of strangers meeting up in a place and, you know, maybe there's some links between them. There were a few twists that were predictable, and the storyline that puts our lead in this situation is kind of cliche, but it's not enough to take away from the enjoyment of the movie. It's certainly not one that's going to tax your brain, but it's still a fun watch. So there you have it, guys, the top 10 horror and thriller movies that are streaming on Disney Plus right now. Like I said in the intro though, even if you don't have Disney Plus, I would still recommend these movies. Let me know, guys, which of these movies you have already seen, or if you are going to check out any from this list. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.